It's no secret that President Trump's peace plan to resolve the situation in Ukraine was discussed before our Alaska meeting, and during that prior discussion, the American side asked us to make certain concessions asked us to show what they called flexibility. The main goal of our meeting in Alaska was that during the talks in Anchorage, we confirmed that despite certain issues and complications on our part, we agree to those suggestions, and we are ready to show the flexibility we were asked. We informed in detail all our partners and friends in the Global South, including China, India, DPRK, South Africa, Brazil, and many other countries, and CSTO countries, of course. All our friends and partners, I'd like to emphasize that every one of them, down to one, supported and upheld those agreements. But as we see after our talks in Alaska, there was a certain pause taken by the United States. We know that this was due to Ukraine's actual refusal from President Trump's peace settlement plan. And I believe this was the reason for its new iteration, the 28-point plan. We have this plan. We received it through our channels of cooperation, and I guess it may serve as foundation for final peace settlement. But this text wasn't discussed with us in detail, and I can surmise why. I guess the reason is the same. The US administration still hasn't been able to secure the approval of Ukraine. Ukraine opposes to that. Obviously, Ukraine and its European allies still harbor illusions and still dream of delivering a strategic defeat to Russia. I think this position is not due to low levels of competence. I won't discuss this side of the matters now, but I think this position is due to lack of objective information on the real situation on the ground, on the battlefield. And obviously, neither Ukraine nor Europe realizes what this ultimately may lead to. Just recently, on the 4th of November, I believe, 2 weeks ago, basically, Kyiv publicly announced that there are no more than 60 Russian troops in that city, and within a matter of days, this city, they claimed, would be fully deblocked by Ukrainian troops. But let me inform you that even back then, on the 4th of November, the city of Kupiansk had been completely claimed by the Russian troops. Our guys were cleaning up blocks and streets. The fate of the city had been sealed by then. What does it tell us? Either the Kyiv leaders have no information on the situation on the battleground, or they have that information, but they can't evaluate it properly. If Kyiv doesn't want to discuss President Trump's propositions, if they refuse to do that, they and the European warmongers must realize that the events in Kupiansk will repeat inevitably in other key sections of the front line. Maybe not as quick as we would like it, but inevitably they will repeat.
This was Putin giving his response to Donald Trump's 28-point peace plan. Obviously, this is Putin who's confident, who understands that the reason that this peace plan is being offered because of events on the ground themselves, meaning this is not out of the kindness of anybody's heart. It's a clear assessment of what is taking place on the ground with the Russians advancing, with Ukraine in political turmoil, with them having $50 million budget shortfall, with them having hundreds of thousands of troops that have effectively abandoned their posts and have ran to other countries, or at the very least got out of Dodge, with 1 million people dead on the Ukrainian side. And this is the US on some level coming to grips with that and offered a plan that is closer, and I'm using the term closer, to Russian demands. Now, as he pointed out, you don't have to accept this. We will accomplish what we need to accomplish on the ground. Perhaps not as fast as we want, but Kupiansk is a good example, and there will be other sectors that will turn into other quote-unquote Kupiansks. I'll make that word up. I'll go with it. I would like to point something out, just to toot my own horn. I got this right. I made the point of saying it seems like there was some kind of agreement on the table in Alaska that seemed to be true, that there was some kind of agreement or conversation that took place where there was a basic sense of agreement. Lavrov kept screaming about it. I don't think Lavrov would be screaming about it for no reason. So there was that. I also pointed out this idea that in the relationship or the conversations that was taking place between Russia and the United States, that the U.S., regardless of what they were saying, seemed to understood what was happening on the ground. And in the context of what was happening on the ground was making moves in a particular direction. Now, Donald Trump might have been looking for leverage. That is true, which is also something I said. But obviously that leverage was not forthcoming. He was not able to get that leverage. And so what you ended up with is a moving of the position of the United States closer and closer and closer to that of the Russian position, because for all intents and purposes, facts on the ground was dictating everything else. Now, you could even make an argument that this is, on some way, legitimizes the position of the Russians. Putin, for the most part, has been very consistent in what he's been pushing for. And it seems that they've been working on 2 tracks. 1, we will accomplish our objectives militarily. 2, we will be open to negotiations, because as I keep pointing out, Putin is chasing safety. And so these 2 tracks are not separate and distinct from one another. These 2 tracks are working in parallel. It's, you don't have to negotiate with us. You don't have to. We will get what we want on the ground. Meaning there are levels that we are willing to accept, even beyond this notion of negotiations. And nothing you do in the context of sanctions, no weapon systems that you send, nothing you do is going to change the inexorable pace of what we were doing in regards to accomplishing our objectives. If you notice in that speech, confident, straightforward. We were in discussions prior with Americans. These discussions had taken place even before Alaska. Alaska was kind of a acknowledgement of sorts. And then we didn't hear anything back from the Americans because Ukraine effectively balked at the deal. Donald Trump has effectively put out an ultimatum to Zelensky on this and to the Kiev government. And they asked Trump, hey, what if Zelensky doesn't go for this? Then what? Now, granted, you have to take what Trump says with a grain of salt because it is Trump and tacos are always on Tuesdays. But listen to what he says here.
Then he can continue. Then he can continue to fight his little heart out.
They said, what if he doesn't accept the deal? Then he can continue to fight his little heart out. If you notice, Kellogg is out, either fired, retiring, something in between. He is gone. So that perspective of the globe apparently is being pushed out. Witkoff is still making these negotiations. You have Rubio, who's sent to the Geneva to have conversations with the Kiev regime. And you get Driscoll, who goes to Ukraine, a new face that goes into Ukraine. And some of the reporting is that he effectively was given an ultimatum. We need you to accept this deal. And we can have conversations about it, but we ultimately need you to accept it. Now, Putin's point is they asked us to have flexibility. Okay, we're willing to have flexibility. This is also something that I said, by the way. I said that under normal circumstances, negotiations are started with, let's say, maximum demands. Let's say maximum demands. Whether they seem maximum or not, they're maximalists. with the idea that you whittle your way to a goal. Nobody starts at the 50-yard line. Everybody starts at the 100-yard line. And there are things that you're willing to accept, and there are things that you're willing to throw away. And my question was, is this a situation where the Russians are starting at a particular position, but there are things that they're willing to give up in that position in order to come to some kind of terms of a deal? And that seems to be the case. That's what flexibility means. Now, that doesn't mean that they're going to be flexible in their core demands. Their core demands are their core demands. No Ukraine in NATO. Obviously, this regime that's in place is going to have to go. The whittling down of the Ukrainian military, those regions, the 5 regions, Crimea, Zaporozhye, Lugansk, Donetsk, Kherson, those Zaporozhye, those are part of the Russian Federation at this point. Meaning there are parts that are core, that are not changing. There are other parts, they may not be core, that are flexible and we can have negotiations on. That is effectively what Putin said in that speech. Look, they asked us to be flexible. We're willing to do that up to a certain point. Now, obviously, there are points in this deal that are non-starters. This idea that Russia is going to give up Zaporozhye nuclear power plant is nonsense. This idea that security guarantees that can initiate a third world war. Okay, there may be security guarantees, but they're not necessarily going to have European troops on Ukrainian soil. Meaning there are parts of the deal that are non-starters, that are a basis for negotiation in the way that Putin said, hey, this is a basis for negotiation. The other part of this is, how do you trust the United States, right? How do you trust anything that Donald Trump puts down on paper? It's Trump, after all. It's the U.S., after all. The United States was engaged in negotiations with Iran and then attacked Iran. Think of all the missile treaties that the United States just ripped up in a heartbeat. The JCPOA, U.S. rips up in a heartbeat. Encroachment of NATO. If you notice, at one point it was, we're not going to move an inch to the east. And they moved all the way to the border. Initially, you had the Minsk agreements, 1 and 2. And what ended up happening? Angela Merkel said, we use those agreements. And agreements that were supposed to stop a war was effectively used to build up Ukrainian military. So you even had the Istanbul agreements. And what happened with that? You get Boris Johnson comes in and scrapes all of it, scraps it. And he makes a profit off of it, by the way, because of his investments. I'm saying, how on earth do you trust the United States in this situation? Now, I would hope that everything I'm saying is part of the Russian calculation. And any deal and negotiation that takes place will, in some way, have some capability of being validated, where trust doesn't matter, where it's just facts on the ground that makes the determining factor and how the negotiations or whatever this deal ends up being. My point is, trust can't be a part of this because there is no more trust that can be had in this situation. Interesting, nonetheless, right? It's interesting, nonetheless. This is my 1-year anniversary show. 1-year anniversary. And what I realized when I look back over it, the radio station ended in October. This show started in November. The first few shows sucked. I would say the first 2 weeks. By the time I started hitting my stride was around November 15th, 16th, 17th, 18th. And I realized I had blown past the first year. So I would use today as being the opening of the first year of the show. This is our anniversary. We have been here doing this in this esteemed location for 1 entire year. I want to thank all of you for it. I want to thank all of you for joining me and staying with me on this particular ride. Anybody who's a newcomer, welcome to the family. But 1 year. 1 year. I thought back on it. I was like, wait a minute. I started this in November. And that was right. I started in November. Mark was my first guest, if I'm not mistaken. And Mark is going to be on here in a few minutes. People like Ted Raw, people like Garland Nixon, Leif Maroof, all of these guys have been with me the entire time. And they were with me at 30,000. And we have now hit over 73,000 over the course of this year. And they've been with me the entire time through. And I appreciate them. Even Scott Ritter. I know people think I harbor negative feelings towards Scott, but I don't. I may joke him sometimes because, the war was supposed to be over with 3 years ago. And I disliked his take on Iran. But me disliking a take on somebody's thing is not the same thing as me disliking the person. And if you notice, I get into arguments with many of the people who come on my show. Hell, I love Alex. What is the guy's name? It'll come to me in a moment. He comes on the show all the time. Craner. And yeah, we fight like cats and dogs, right? So that's not necessarily the standard by which I use in regards to liking people. I just assume that you're always going to have disagreements with people at some point. My point is, all of these people were beneficial to allowing the show to maintain itself, to build the show, and allow the show to be what it is, this little engine that could. And they all have my thanks. I don't want to necessarily go through a list because you always miss people when you go out through a name a list. But obviously, Ted is, I've known Ted for years at this point, and Ted has been a great friend of the show. He will be on the show later today. Dimitri Lascaris. Dimitri was always gracious. He started coming on the show probably midway through. Kofi. We have a lot of new faces in this case also. But all of them have my thanks. All of you as an audience also have my thanks. Arno was here last week, if I'm not mistaken. He did the week before last. So no, man, all of you have my thanks. It has been a hell of a year, a lot of transitions, and yet you have my thanks for it. Speaking of that, we are joined